And now, as they say, something completely different. A man with an obsession, not for agricultural research or microscopes, but for tractors. His name is Mike Karslake. He's a professional model maker who lives at Southend, and his work and his hobby tend to be a mixture of business with pleasure. Well, actually, he's got two hobbies, and when David Sorday went to visit, he found him busy with the other two-wheeled one.
Mike Karslake has two overriding passions in life. On the one hand, he's an unabashed and dedicated tractor buff, and on the other, he's a scooter enthusiast. In fact, as president of the British Lambretta Association and keeper of a scooter museum in Southend, he has a vested interest in the machines.
A lot of people, of course, know me for my pursuits and as president of the Lambretta Club of Great Britain and the Lambretta Preservation Society. Now, I don't think I'm eccentric with the Lambretta because it's a beautifully designed industrial piece, and a lot of people these days don't appreciate the qualities of the design that was put into them in those days. But the scooters, and especially the old ones that I have in the collection, are just great as far as I'm concerned.
The vicarage where he lives is home for his other hobby, a vast and ever-growing collection of model tractors. There are even a few full-size vintage versions in the garden.
I've been collecting tractors, toys and model tractors, that is, for about 15 years. And I have a collection of probably about 1,000 pieces. These I've collected all over the world, and of course included in that collection are the models that I make as well. The fascination of collecting tractors, I think, is that it's not an academic pursuit, such as stamp collecting. It's something solid, three-dimensional. It doesn't need a lot of thinking about, and I think they make a pretty looking collection. Their colours and the shapes, which are very functional, I think is the main attraction.
Making and collecting tractors is more than a pastime, though, because the Karslakes run a family business making all types of scale models to order. The model of the Thames flood barrier was one of their creations. But an important part of the bread and butter comes from supplying the world's tractor enthusiasts. This batch were almost ready to go and had been assembled from components entirely made here. Designs start at the drawing board stage, scaling down manufacturers' measurements to make moulds for the vacuum forming machine.
Now we put the sheet of rigid plastic, this is polystyrene, into the machine, clamp it down tightly and bring the heater across to the top. This heats the plastic up to a very flexible condition, and by experience we know exactly when the flexibility is just right. We apply the air pressure for moving the platen into position, and as we do that, the molten plastic or flexible plastic forms over the mould, and then we apply the vacuum, and this pulls the plastic straight into the tool or mould and forms the components we want for the tractor.
With the vacuum-formed parts in hand, Mike can now sit down in his workshop to begin assembly in earnest.
What I'm doing now, in fact, is taking the sheet from the vacuum former, and we're really dividing this up like a plastic kit, and we're taking away the odd items that we want for the model. Basically, this is a kit of plastic parts, and we cut it all up. And what I'm doing now is that once they're cut from the sheet, is taking all the flash from it, because we've sanded them off, and we're just taking off all this surplus material that we don't want. And really, it's a very, very simple process, because it's a question of two halves being put together like that, and we trim them off and we use a solvent to weld them together. You can actually see the tank coming into shape, and eventually we get that sort of thing. And you can see now that we have the completed tank and the radiator there on the vacuum formed piece of plastic, and that in turn will go on the aluminium casting, and that will be stuck on the aluminium casting together with the cylinder head, which goes onto the engine block. The mud guards are also cut out and fitted to the back, and eventually once the units are sprayed, we start getting the tractor coming into this sort of form. And you can see it relates quite well to what we've got there.
Wheels can be either cast from metal or, for the road versions, moulded from rubber.
We make up the wheel with all the little nuts and bolts and things like that, and quite simply we pour over a flexible rubber, which makes a mould. It's a synthetic celastomer rubber mould. And the mould, once we peel it from the wheel, is that sort of thing. So it's quite flexible, and it has to be flexible because we've got to get the tread out, and of course there's an undercut, so you'd never get it out of a solid mould. So the thing literally has to be peeled away. If I peel that off, you'll see the sort of thing we've got in there. There's an actual wheel ready to be deflashed, machined up, and to be put onto a field marshal tractor.
How much time does it take to make up a tractor like that?
Well, from start to finish, going from the drawings right through the various processes we've talked about, I suppose you can say about 2 weeks.
It's a labour-intensive business then?
It is, yes, yes. A lot of people, of course, look at them as toys, but they're not. They are an exclusive, limited production run, really.
And do they sell for the price of a toy or for a bit more than that?
No, a little bit more than that. This one, for instance, sells for £375. But of course it isn't a toy, and it goes out to museums and collectors the world over.
It's obviously an expensive business to buy those tractors, so and the price puts them out of the range of children.
Yes.
What sort of people are interested in collecting and buying model tractors like that?
Well, our biggest market is America. Over there's a massive following of model tractor enthusiasts, and each year there's a convention of these model tractor collectors. I went to one 2 years ago and 6,000 people turned up. And of course, something as British as a field marshal tractor or the Fordson E27N really delights the Americans, and of course they snap up anything that is British made and is so typically a British tractor.
It sounds a strange pastime. What switches people on to tractors?
I think it's a childhood memory. I think most of us, when we were young, sat on a tractor or drove a tractor. I don't know, it's better than collecting stamps, I think.
And quite a few farmers actually collect the real thing, I suppose because they've got room for them. And quite often they'll be cheaper than the models, which can cost, as you saw, more than £300 or £400 each.